Have you ever heard of the soup Ciorba? It's a traditional Romanian sour soup, light, bright, and deeply nourishing, and it's meant to be comforting without being heavy. It's rich with lots of gut-friendly root vegetables and just an overall simple yet delicious soup. I'm Anya with Prepare and Nourish, and today I'm making Romanian chicken ciorba soup, a chicken-based version that I've come to love for how practical and grounding it is. We'll start by making the chicken broth. I'm using about a pound and a half of bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs because they give us both the meat and the broth in one easy step. Season it simply with a few bay leaves, whole peppercorns, and salt, and then cover everything with water and bring to a boil. As I mentioned in the beginning, there are many versions of ciorba, and one of the most consistent flavor profile between all of the versions that I've come across online is celery. And so you have, like in today's recipe, we're using, not only are we using the celery ribs, we're using the celeriac root, which is the root of the celery plant. And it looks like this. It has a very rough skin, and so we would have to peel all of this, and it would expose to like a very pungent, very aromatic celery, almost like parsnip texture. I love recipes where we're actually using everything from leaf to the root. So when you think of celery, this is what it looks like, right? And when my friend shared this recipe with me, she also gave me like a packet of seasoning, and it's not really seasoning; it's more like an herb, and it's called lustian, which is this is what it looks like. And interestingly enough, the fresh leaves of this herb actually look very much like celery leaves. Now, I like to make my recipes as easy and the ingredients to make them as accessible as possible to, just like a regular consumer. The ingredients that you would find at your local grocery store, Kroger, Safeway, Sprouts, whatever. So this, I'm thinking you could probably pick up like at your local European market. However, it's not necessary. You could replicate that same flavor profile by using, like I said, using the root, the celery root, and we're using the leaves of the celery as well. So we are going to use a few ribs of the celery, but I feel like there's a lot of flavor in the leaves themselves. There's a lot of variables in this soup, and that's okay. Like, that's why I like to make sure that the ingredients are accessible to you, and just available to you. The vegetables in the soup are simple, but they're very intentional. I'm using a mix of orange and green bell peppers, parsnips, celeriac root, carrots, and celery, leaves included. Each one plays a role in keeping the soup light but still satisfying without relying on heavy ingredients. The bell peppers add body and a subtle sweetness without needing long cooking, so be sure to add them towards the end of the cooking time. Parsnips and carrots bring it a natural softness and help round out the broth, especially once they're finely diced. And celeriac root, though looks rough and a little intimidating on the outside, but once you peel it, the inside is mild and perfect for soups like this. It adds structure and substance. And celery, of course, especially the leaves, adds a savory backbone that keeps the broth from tasting flat. And it's also a great stand-in for the Lucian Boar's seasoning many don't have access to. Together, these vegetables cook down gently and make the soup easy to eat and easy to digest. They also stretch the soup in a very real, practical way, which is exactly how dishes like this were meant to work. Nourishing, filling, and made from ingredients that are accessible and familiar. Once the chicken has cooked through, we'll remove it from the broth and let it cool slightly, just enough to handle without burning fingers. Then it's time for vegetable prep. And this part really matters. I take the time to dice everything fairly small, not because it has to be perfect, but because it completely changes how the soup eats. Smaller pieces cook more evenly, soften at the same rate, and blend into the broth instead of standing out as chunky or uneven bites. And finely diced vegetables also make the soup easier to eat, especially for anyone recovering or not feeling their best. You get a little bit of everything in each spoonful, the texture feels more delicate, and the flavors come together in a way that feels cohesive rather than busy. It's a small step, but it's one of the reasons this soup feels gentle and nourishing instead of heavy and rustic. And anytime working with a lot of vegetables, I try to remember to save the scraps and peels. They go straight into a Ziploc bag in the freezer, ready for the next time I make bone broth. Saute all the root veggies in a little bit of avocado oil or another healthy fat. Then once they are soft and flavorful, add the diced bell peppers. Try to avoid adding them in too early because they can get too soft too fast. At this point, add the Lucian seasoning if you have it, and if not, no worries. Once the chicken has cooled enough to handle, I pick up all the meat and cut it into smaller bite-sized pieces so it's easy to eat and distributes evenly throughout the soup. I strain the broth and directly back into the pot to remove the bay leaves and peppercorns, keeping the base clean and simple. From there, everything comes together gently. Right at the end, I add a squeeze of fresh lemon juice to brighten the soup and brings the flavors into balance, followed by a generous handful of chopped parsley. That final touch keeps the soup tasting light and fresh, and it's what really makes Ciorba what it is. And there you have it. A pot of simple, nourishing soup that does exactly what it's meant to do. It's comforting without being heavy, easy to reheat, and gentle enough for days when someone just needs real food that feels steady and supportive. This is also a soup that travels well. I often transfer it to mason jars so it's easy to bring to a friend who's recovering or could use a nourishing meal. If you'd like the full recipe with exact measurements and all my tips, you'll find it on my website at prepareandnourish.com. While you're there, you can explore other nourishing recipes, from ferments and organ meats to quick, real food dinners like this one. And if this kind of content resonates with you, I'd love for you to subscribe here on YouTube so you don't miss more real food recipes. You can also check out my digital cookbook, Dinner Decoded, where I share real food dinners built for busy families. Simple, nourishing recipes that make everyday meals feel doable. The link to Dinner Decoded is in the caption. Eat well, be nourished, and I'll see you soon.